I'm going to be attempting to learn one of the most difficult violin techniques, upper staccato.
You know, Eddie, there is always down bow staccato. But really though, let's talk about how you actually learn up bow staccato. I'm Tobiah Murphy, and this is Murphy Music Academy. So, much like Eddie, I was also not blessed enough to be born with a naturally good up bow staccato.
Some people just seem to have it. And other people, no matter how much they try, they can't do it.
I also don't have perfect pitch, so I'm kind of worst of both worlds as far as the two-set boys go. I do have a very good natural down bow staccato. So, there's that. However, like Eddie, I also did learn to conquer my problems with up bow staccato, and I did it while learning Introduction and Rondo Capriccioso. The problem with two-sets video, though, is that Eddie doesn't really show you how to improve your up bow staccato if you weren't blessed enough by the violin gods to come by it naturally. So in this video, I'm going to show you a very simple exercise that I use to learn up bow staccato and that I also use to teach my students. And yes, you heard that correct. One exercise. Let's dig in. So at the beginning of Eddie's journey in learning up bow staccato, he did drop a very important piece of information.
Day one, let's go. Right now, I'm actually starting slow. I'm just trying to make sure my wrist is really relaxed.
The problem though, Eddie, is you didn't really show a relaxed wrist there or really any wrist motion at all. Really all he's doing is alternating between pronation and supination, or if you don't know those technical terms, just twisting the arm back and forth this way and that way. Not a very good strategy for learning up bow staccato. However, it's important to point out because that's actually a very common mistake students make when they're trying to learn this technique. You have to use your wrist. So we're going to start with just that. So place the bow at the tip, preferably on the A string, but it doesn't really matter. Make sure that you've got a good connection of the hair with the string, and then you're going to perform an up bow using the wrist only, and maybe a little bit of the fingers, like this. Now, that may seem simple, but if you don't have complete control over your wrist in violin playing, which a lot of violin students don't, then this is going to be a lot harder than it looks. If that's you, then I'd suggest going and spending a lot of time making sure you have control over the wrist motion in playing, maybe just some back and forth, before trying to learn up bow staccato. But if you're able to do this with no problem, then the next thing you want to do is reset the wrist, like so you can do it again, and then reset, and do it again, and keep doing this, all the way to the frog. So what I just demonstrated is really nothing more than an extremely exaggerated form of up bow staccato. It's really not any more complicated than that. The tricky part though is learning how to speed up this motion and make it smaller. So we're going to do just that. So I'm going to start here, make sure I have a good connection to the string, and a little faster than what I first demonstrated, but not much. And then a little faster with slightly smaller wrist motions. And a little faster, a little smaller motion. And again. You're probably going to want to be doing that with a metronome and increasing the tempo ever so slightly as you go faster. However, for the sake of time, I'm demonstrating without one. Now, doing the technique this way, you're probably not going to get much faster than 100 or 110 to the quarter note playing sixteenths. Here's 110. This is the technique of up bow staccato that you're going to be using in most of your pieces. Because remember, as cool as a rapid up bow staccato is, most major repertoire does not use it. So if you can do this at 100 or 110, you're mostly good to go. Think the Tchaikovsky Concerto, or the Sibelius Concerto, or even Sean Rosemary. That may not have been the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of up bow staccato, but that's mostly what up bow staccato is going to be when you're playing major repertoire. But having this very elegant wrist motion is going to be incredibly valuable for your playing generally. But I do know you came here for the good stuff, so now let's talk about that fun, rapid up bow staccato. When it comes to the rapid up-bow staccato, you do need to have this basic wrist motion learned first. However, once you start pushing around 120 or so on the metronome doing 16th notes, you are going to have to start experimenting. Pick any 5 violinists with a great rapid up-bow staccato, and you'll kind of notice that they all do something a little bit different from each other. You're going to need the basic wrist motion, but whether or not you hold the bow with all of your fingers or with just a few, which fingers you decide to hold the bow with, how high or how low you keep the elbow, and a myriad other factors will all be very specific to you. So first make sure you can do the basic technique, and then you can start experimenting. Of course, to give you kind of a starting idea, I'll tell you what more or less works for me. So when I do this, I want to feel like my upper arm is so heavy it's almost pulling out of my socket. I want to feel that weight really dig into the string. And then I really want to drive with my forearm here and of course twitch the wrist. And when it comes to my fingers, I actually kind of change which fingers hold the bow as I get a little closer to the frog. However, I feel typically I usually start out with kind of a very light hold without the pinky. And then as I get a little bit closer to the frog, I kind of tend to take the ring finger off as well. That's more or less what works for me. May not work for you, but it gives you an idea of one of the things you can try. Anyway, I hope you've at least found this somewhat helpful. And remember, be patient. You're not going to learn this in a week. And also, remember, there are great violinists that do not have a good up-bow staccato. Nathan Milstein, for all his brilliance, did not have a very good rapid up-bow staccato. So, you can still be a great violinist without one. I've been Tobias Murphy for Murphy Music Academy. Of course, always here to remind you, there is no pleasure in mediocrity. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.